supply chain,
consulting,
warehouse operations,
market share,
revenue,
material handling,
sales,
transportation.
It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end.
Well, it's the end of the week.
It is.
It's funny how we could say it's the end of the week, but we both have meetings after this. That's the magic. The magic of a podcast is maybe it's not always the end of the week.
End of the week is
when
any
you're
time
filling
in the
this
week.
out. How you doing?
Good.
Excellent. Good to see you. So, hot topic that everybody wants a little background on is this whole thing around digital twins.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe if you can do me a favor, and in your words, elegant as they often are, tell us what a digital twin is.
Well, a digital twin is basically a digital representation of something. It could be a product, or it could be a system, or such as a supply chain. So let's bring it into our world. So a digital twin of a supply chain would be a digital representation that allows to replicate to some degree. It could be, it doesn't have to be, it could be extremely precise, could be high level, it could be an entire supply chain, it could be parts of the supply chain, but the goal is to replicate how a supply chain functions with all its parts, its moving parts, its capacities, and so on and so forth, so that you can understand how it would, how elements of the supply chain would unfold given different set of conditions, which in a way you could say, well, isn't that what simulation is for? So simulation would be part of a digital twin, with the caveat that the simulation within a digital twin would be connected to live systems, whether it's your ERP, your warehouse management system, your manufacturing execution system. Any of this, you can basically plug it so that you can understand when abnormal events occur, and therefore, and also allow you to test different scenarios so that you can mitigate or try some plans when things don't go as planned.
All right, so you said a lot there, so maybe we should just unpack that. So, the antecedent, if you think it in terms of the evolution of these ideas, is the simulation, right? And I don't think we have to go so broad as a whole network. Let's just pick a warehouse, right? We've got a distribution center, and while it doesn't happen all the time, it would happen, a few times a year, where a client would ask for a simulation of a design or of an existing build. And again, you said it well, that simulation allows us to test the operating conditions under a variety of scenarios. So we could do some sensitivity analysis, and we could do some risk analysis in the safety of a digital model without having to go and build the building and see what blows up if we move this there, or we do this. So the key distinction between why we no longer call those things, we still have simulations, but the key distinction is that from a simulation to evolve into what is a full-blown digital twin,
it is connected to live systems.
It's live systems and live data that is feeding it.
Correct.
So in theory, not only am I testing scenarios, which I can do, but I also have a real-time view of what is going on in my operation. So if I happen to be, or if I'm you and I'm on vacation in Lisbon, and you want to see how a warehouse is functioning, you just went live with a new thing, you happen to have built a digital twin, you in theory would be able to have access even from an iPad, and call up the digital twin and see, oh, okay, this is functioning, which, you know, it's kind of this interesting amalgam of the simulation and dashboards, simple productivity and performance dashboards.
Yes, that's correct. And a third component, so the term we see or hear as well is control tower. And the control tower could be composed of one or multiple digital twins, would have then the dashboards so that you can have visualization of what's happening, whether it is normal or not, and could have other components such as an interface for individuals to actually test those what if. So something goes wrong, you're notified, you need to ship from a different warehouse, or you need to bring in more inventory, whatever it is, you could test these scenarios and throw it into your digital twin and see what the potential outcome
Even
are.
down to, let's say, you're halfway through the shift and you can identify where you're falling behind in production, and you want to test, can I shift? If I shift 10 folks from one area of the warehouse to another area of the warehouse, right, is that, will I survive, or have I just moved the problem from that area back to the warehouse?
Correct. Will I meet the output? You could do this, and call it the beauty, or because it is connected to real life system. Because you say, well, a simulation, I could try these, but that would be pre-shift
historic data.
Historic
it's
data,
not actually it's so it's a level of accuracy is what you're getting out of it. Is it worth it?
Well, that's a very good question. Is it worth it? It depends. Well, the answer is yes.
In all cases.
No, exactly. Not in all cases. There
Right,
could.
so the answer is it depends.
It depends. The answer is it depends. Yes, in some cases, whether you are dealing with or regularly with events that are abnormal, and you want to be able to mitigate that risk or be able to react to it in a faster and with better visibility and the tools to understand what the impact will be. Yes, I believe that would be quite useful.
Well, let's back up for a second. You know, the question of if anything is worth it is, what does it cost me? And what's the value I get out of it, right? So let's take a second to think about costs. Because digital twins are not cheap, if you think about it, right?
Very expensive.
A simulation is in itself a pretty expensive thing to build.
Yeah.
And if we think about what a perfect digital twin, start with what a perfect digital twin really implies. All right, we're spending the time to build out a simulated world, right? With all the right rules and all the right timing, because David picking in the warehouse in real life and David picking in that digital twin, they have to move, reach, grab, shuffle, change pallets, or grab totes, or all that activity has to be
Replicate reality.
Yeah. Now that is not an insurmountable hurdle, but still that has to be set up. That's an expensive prospect. And then when you're saying, I'm going to tie in, I want all real-time data. First off, real-time, I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, right?
Yeah.
When we say real-time, we mean near real-time.
Correct.
Because you can't actually, or you can, if you wanted to interact with live databases right there and then all these transactions could this is where we need Jean Martin.
Yeah.
We need someone smarter about technology than us, but
It requires massive amount of computing.
that processing capacity that you may say to yourself, ooh,
Is it worth it?
is it worth it?
Yeah.
Right?
But
So how live is live data? And then exactly how many parameters of data do I want to feed this system?
And therefore, which are the source, which then creates multiple interfaces.
Yeah. So you think about just something as simple as, okay, so now to actually get to the cost, I mean, there's an 80-20 rule here. An 80% good enough digital twin will be, 20% of the cost of building a digital twin.
Yeah.
And then that last 20% of accuracy is where 80% of the costs come from. So before you really can know how much it costs, you have to figure out, what for my business do I really need out of this digital twin?
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Correct. And I think the concept of MVP, or minimum viable product, is applicable here because it's something that can evolve, right? That you can add precision, or that you can add a set of questions that you'll want to be able to answer later down the road. But regardless, even if you want to answer a single question, you still need a certain level of granularity in your simulation and accessing the source of data that are required to answer that questions. But you could evolve into something that over time can be actually can answer multiple aspects of your operations.
I mean, just to put it in perspective, okay? Let's just think of a pick line, something simple as a conventional pick line. And do I have the items with live, accurate slotting? As everyone who's watching knows, a warehouse is going to add and delete SKUs all the time. So keeping that live, what your pick line, the exact pick line looked like last week is slightly different, marginally, from what it looks like today. Now that's not a big hurdle to keep that live, right?
Right.
And then there's, okay, I want to know where every material instance of inventory for the item that is in each pick slot, I want to know where it is. In other words, I want to know where the reserve inventory is sitting, so that when I do replenishments in my digital twin, that my replenishments accurately reflect the replenishment I'm doing into that pick slot from exact location to the exact location, right? So now not only is my digital twin, you can see 3 levels of I've introduced 2 levels of complexity, right? First, I could have just put the items, get the live pick slot, but assume some random approximation of where the replenishment's coming from. Next level of detail is, no, I want exactly live locations of reserves so that my replenishments are being performed accurately in my digital twin. That's level 2. Implied in that level 2 is I have programmed my digital twin to perform the replenishment logic. So I got 3 pallets sitting within 20 feet of that pick location. I got 3 pallets of reserve sitting up there, and I've got my digital twin. I got to program it to mirror the logic I use to replenish, right?
In my warehouse management system.
Right. Of course, you're going to say in a food environment, it's FIFO. Let's say, right? First expired, first out. So just grab the oldest pallet. Well, when you have 3 pallets that have come in with the same expiry date, then what is it? So you see. So now I've got the digital twin. I have to program what the FIFO rule. Then default to what is the calculation of the closest a pallet. But you have to understand what that calculation is, because different warehouse management systems use different algorithms to produce that decision tree. Well, this is a lot to program. It's a very expensive endeavor.
And you can question the value of it.
And you question the value of it, because if I'm not really, when you start off with a digital twin, you say, well, let me do some disaster recovery scenario testing. That's the classic opening of the value of a digital twin. I don't know, choosing between two pallets, pallet A, pallet B, same expiry date, I don't know that there's a value in actually reprogramming an exact replica of your operation.
Yeah, exactly. As you have to draw the line, or if I had that information, would I approach the solution in a different manner than I know how to approach it when something similar happens, because I have the experience and therefore I need to I know what to do. And back to what you're saying is also like the intensity of how much data you would need to process becomes very costly and very demanding.
Right. So you got to be careful with the intensity of the data, and you got to be careful with the amount of setup that you do.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is out of the gate, the CEO of any business will say, I want a digital twin.
Yeah.
And too many people will take that literally to mean, oh, we want to get to that nth level. But actually what you need to do is ask yourself, what are the problems I'm solving, both in that day-to-day real-time management and in this contingency disaster plan? You've got to answer those questions so that you can properly get to the level of precision you need so that its cost matches the value. And I don't mean one for one, but the cost is an acceptable burden for the value you pull out of it.
Yeah, correct. And also, in order to be able to, what do you do to what's the first step? Not necessarily the first step, but there's a theme that we've discussed also when we talked about automation as a business that say, okay, that makes sense. I'll do a blueprint that makes sense. It's going to answer what I need. I'll make it evolve. I'll have all my dashboards. But okay, so I'm ready to go. And as with automation, a business needs to be matured with its systems in order to do so. You cannot launch something like this if you're not mature with your ERP or your warehouse management or any other operational or planning system within your business, because it's going to be completely useless.
Yeah.
So that's a step that needs to be in order before you can even think about it.
So if we say there's 100,000 distribution centers in North America, some number like that, how many of them need a digital twin, if you had to guess?
5%, 10%.
Wow,
5%.
That's a big market. I like it. Let's go after it. I would have said 1,000, 1%.
1%, okay.
I don't think the vast majority of warehouses actually need a digital twin.
Fair enough. You're right. It's maybe the question would be, instead of how many DCs, is how many networks need.
So bring it to that network level, okay?
Yeah. Then I could see the number become bigger, and as a percentage.
Well, what do you mean by a network? Because
Go ahead. An organization that needs to manage multiple facilities to cover their market.
So if I have 2 warehouses in my network, does that count?
Well, it does count as a network. Yeah, I think so. But it's because if we take it in your example of within the 4 walls, I agree the number is small. But then if you want, from a network perspective, there's the number of facilities you can. If you're a retailer, you can start thinking about your stores. If you have your own fleet, you can start thinking about this. So there's as more questions you want answers for, or the more elements there are in your digital twin, then it adds value. I think if you develop it into something that does capture, not necessarily is more precise or what the level of granularity, but whether the number of components in your supply chain are.
So that's a really important thing. It's not about the granularity of the data, because the caution I would have, and I think you'd share this, again, CEO walks in, says to the team, I want a digital twin of my supply network, right? I want this entire supply chain. And I've got some I got some key suppliers overseas. I've got manufacturing also in different locations overseas and manufacturing locally. I've got distribution centers. I've got last mile distribution. I've got some 3PLs that are doing, it's a complicated web that needs to be orchestrated, and I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. And you say, well, digital twin sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I think the danger becomes folks have to be very careful up front with defining what are precisely the right questions that I want to pull out of this model before I go off building it.
Exactly. What is the need? Because you could go very wide, very high level, or not punctual, but local, precise,
and proxy,
But proxy, and then go to a certain level of granularity and detail that is efficient. If I only manage one DC, that might be useful. If I manage a manufacturing organization, then I may not need every little detail, at least to start. But I do want to see end to end.
Because what I see is that wish list comes out. People insist, we want the wish list. Tell us what it costs to get the wish list.
And they go, oh.
And then it breaks their heart because it's so ridiculously expensive. But that's what it would be.
It's expensive because...
So I think your point is, just to start modestly, the only danger there is making sure that you don't box yourself in, that you're able to build it out and build it out and build it down in depth and let like your own network in real life, let it evolve over time as the level of questions get a little more complicated or a little more precise or a little more far-ranging.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, I think we've killed this one then.
Hey, good, perfect.
All right, have a good meeting.
Have a good meeting as well.
Take care.